How did the United States and Israel carry out a preemptive strike against Iran? Well, they relied on a powerful tactic known as time on target. Using 2 aircraft carriers along with several naval destroyers, military planners calculated the exact timing so that Israeli aircraft and American cruise missiles would reach their objectives at precisely the same moment. Israel's primary objective was to eliminate key leadership figures, including Khamenei and other senior officials, while U.S. forces focused on striking military installations and other high-value strategic infrastructure. But one critical question remained. Why did Iran's air defense systems fail to activate in time? The answer lies in a different category of warfare. The United States employed advanced electronic warfare capabilities, operating from space, sea, and air. These systems disrupted and blinded Iranian radar networks, just as naval destroyers launched waves of cruise missiles aimed at disabling anti-air defenses. But the conflict was far from finished. Iran still possesses thousands of ballistic missiles and drones capable of targeting American and Allied bases throughout the Middle East. At this stage, nearly every military installation in the region could become a potential target. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel initiated a large coordinated military operation against Iran. Israeli officials referred to their campaign as Operation Roar the Lion, while the U.S. mission became known as Operation Epic Fury. The message behind the joint strike was unmistakable. This was not simply a demonstration of strength. It was a carefully planned mission intended to eliminate the supreme leader of Iran. As mentioned earlier, the strike was not random. The primary objective was the supreme leader's own compound, with missiles precisely guided toward highly sensitive sections of the complex. If you enjoyed detailed military analysis and strategic breakdowns like this, make sure to subscribe to Telly Vortex and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next documentary on modern warfare. We're talking specifically around University Street, the Jamhuri District, and near Pastoran Street. If you know the layout of Tehran, you know exactly what this means. This zone isn't just another neighborhood. It is the absolute nerve center of the Iranian government. It houses the primary day-to-day offices of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. But here's the catch. The IDF says they got him, and Iranian military says Khamenei was not inside his offices when the missiles actually made an impact. The strike may have leveled the compound, but the target slipped away. And right now, the entire region is holding its breath, waiting to see what happens next. But reports says Israel says Khamenei's body has been found and he is confirmed dead. Listen, that first wave, it didn't hold back, not even a little. We're talking about a perfectly synchronized, overwhelming assault. The entire goal was to blind and the regime all at once. First, they hit Karaj, just completely ripping through their critical industrial and aerospace hubs. Then, Tehran, the capital, rocked. Any illusion of safety they had was just completely shattered. They didn't stop there. They struck Qom, sending absolute shockwaves right through the ideological heart of the country. And if you follow this stuff, you know exactly how heavily fortified that area is. Over in the west, missiles literally rained down on Kermanshah. They neutralized those launch sites before the operators could even think about powering up their radars. And then there's Isfahan, the absolute crown jewel of their nuclear and drone programs. Heavily defended, didn't matter. It just lit up the night sky. But how did the US and Israel actually pull off a preemptive strike on Iran? First of all, look at this map. To make this happen, they didn't just rely on local land bases. They brought 2 massive floating cities right to Iran's doorstep. Down in the Arabian Sea, you've got the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group bearing down on the south and east. And over in the eastern Mediterranean, the biggest, newest ship, USS Gerald R. Ford. While Israeli jets flew all the way across the Middle East to reach Iranian airspace, timing was absolutely critical. The moment those IDF jets reached their marks, the missiles were released. And that brings us to the most terrifying, complicated part of this entire operation, the synchronization. Military planners rely on a tactic called time on target. Look at this map. You have missiles firing from submarines, cruise missiles launching from escort ships, and massive payload drops from stealth bombers. They are all deploying from completely different locations at entirely different times. But here is the genius of it. The US military machine was mathematically choreographed, so everything impacted Kajin, Kermanshah, and Isfahan at the exact same second the Israeli jets dropped their guided bombs. It was designed to be a total systemic shock and explodes at the same time, a move to collapse the regime instantly. When those munitions finally hit, it was pure shock and awe. But why did the Iranian air defenses fail to activate? Well, to put it simply, the US military operates in a completely different league. Using a highly advanced mix of electronic warfare and cyber operations coordinated from space to the ground, the coalition was able to inject false data directly into Iranian radar screens. Top-tier Iranian air defense systems like their homegrown Bavar and their Russian-supplied batteries were absolutely overwhelmed by this electronic assault. But to actually hunt them down, the US set a brilliant trap. They launched hundreds of ABM-160 MAL miniature air-launched decoys. To a panicked Iranian radar operator staring at a chaotic screen, these tiny drones look exactly like a massive squadron of F-15s or F-16s screaming toward the capital. With the door kicked wide open, fifth-generation stealth fighters, including both US and Israeli F-35s with possible F-22 Raptors, sliced through the airspace completely undetected. Ultimately, the Iranian air defense network wasn't just suppressed, it was completely dismantled, at least for the time period. Because the Iranians do have a huge firepower. Tehran has fired back, and Operation Truthful Promise 4, a massive wave of missiles and drones just targeted US bases in Israel.
Here's the fallout. The UAE's Al Dhafar air base was hit, leaving one dead from shrapnel. In Bahrain, the US Navy's 5th Fleet HQ was directly targeted. Qatar's air defenses successfully wiped out incoming missiles while Kuwait locked down its entire airspace under heavy fire. Meanwhile, nationwide sirens are blasting across Israel, with massive mid-air interceptions lighting up the skies over Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. But how did Israel manage to fly all the way to Iran? At 9 in the morning, Israel launched more than a dozen aircraft. But it's a complicated process. They have to navigate or entirely bypass the airspace of neighboring countries like Syria and Iraq. To avoid hostile air defenses, defense analysts estimate the actual flight distance to reach central Iran is between 930 and 1,240 miles each way. Although these routes may seem straightforward, they involve complex planning, including calculations for air refueling and coordinating attack aircraft to pass through Jordan, Syria, and Iraq. Israel and US strategy was to attack Iran in 3 waves. The first wave targeted surface air-to-air sites, radar installations, and Iran's air defense headquarters in Tran Ilam and Keshtan. The second wave focused on destroying ballistic missiles. And finally, the third wave targeted military manufacturing industries. Kicking down the door, the attack begins not with manned aircraft, but with robotic precision from the sea. The goal is simple: blind the enemy's eyes, that are radars, and silence their voice, their command and control. In the Persian Gulf and the Northern Arabian Sea, Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, ships like the USS Thomas Hudner, received the launch order. The vertical launch system cells is open, and moments later, dozens of Tomahawk land attack missiles erupt from the decks. These missiles fly at subsonic speeds, hugging the terrain in what we call nap-of-the-earth flight to stay below the radar horizon. They are programmed to loiter and strike simultaneously. Their warheads slam into S-300 and S-400 radar sites and command bunkers.
They degrade the integrated air defense system, effectively carving out safe corridors for the pilots who are minutes behind them. 30 minutes past H-, while the Tomahawks are still impacting, the silver bullets of the U.S. Air Force are already deep inside hostile airspace.
These are the B-2 Spirit stealth bombers. With the air defense network fractured by Tomahawk cruise missiles, usually fired from destroyers hundreds of miles away, the path is now clear. Now comes the strategic sites like nuclear bunkers, which can be bombed by B-2's Spirit, the tip of the spear. Launching from bases in Jordan and the UAE, squadrons of F-15E Strike Eagles roar into the theater. These are the bomb trucks of the operation. Each F-15 is heavily laden with G-dams and small-diameter bombs. Interestingly, it can carry up to 19 G-dams or 28 small-diameter weapons. While the B-2s hit the deep bunkers, the F-15s hunt the mobile targets. Their APG-63V1 radars scan the ground for ballistic missile launchers hiding in valleys. Working in pairs, they drop precision bombs on missile convoys, hangars, and secondary command nodes. Once they are Winchester, out of ammo or low on fuel, they don't go home yet. They connect to this tanker common launch tube that fits into almost any aircraft's existing fuel hatch. They retreat to those tanker tracks, established in Phase 1, taking on thousands of pounds of jet fuel in mid-air before turning back for a second sortie. 2 hours pass. Out to sustain the pressure, the U.S. Navy's floating air bases enter the fight.
Cruising in the Arabian Sea, a carrier strike group turns into the wind. Steam and electromagnetic catapults begin launching aircraft every 30 seconds. FA-18 Super Hornets launch carrying anti-radiation missiles. Their job is the destruction of enemy air defenses. They're hunting down any surviving radar operators foolish enough to turn their systems on. Meanwhile, F-35C Lightning push forward to gather intelligence and strike high-threat targets that the older jets cannot reach. Orbiting far behind them are the E-2 Hawkeyes, the quarterbacks in the sky, managing the massive traffic of hundreds of U.S. jets. By sunrise, the opening wave of the assault is complete. Enemy radar networks have been blinded by waves of Tomahawk missiles. Critical elements of the nuclear program have been struck by B-2 stealth bombers, while missile launch capabilities have been targeted by F-15 fighters and carrier-based aircraft. This marks the conclusion of the first phase of the operation, but the larger conflict is still unfolding. If you enjoyed detailed military breakdowns and strategic analysis like this, make sure to subscribe to Telly Vortex and turn on notifications so you never miss our next documentary on modern warfare.